Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I want to go ahead and do a little bit of a preface to this video. This video is not personal. It's not a personal attack against Tim Pool. This video is about activism within the anti-FA space, both online and in person. So one of the biggest things that I care about in regards to fighting fat acceptance is I want us to understand more effective ways of fighting back. I want us to win, right? That's why I feel like I am fat acceptance's worst nightmare, because I will take it further than most, so to speak. But I want to go ahead and do that here. And basically, this isn't about politics. This isn't about anything like that. I don't really do that on this channel. This is purely about fighting back against fat activism. And so what we're going to do is we're going to critique Tim Pool's video, because he is a very good example of a typical person that goes into the anti-FA space that makes various pitfalls. And so I want to point out those pitfalls during this video. This is just my opinion. I'm just offering my perspective as somebody who has had BED, as somebody who has been super fat. I've lost 80 pounds of fat, right? So I'm speaking from that type of experience. I've been fat most of my life. I was never fat acceptance, but I was fat ambivalence, okay? And that is over. When I almost died, it definitely killed that in me. So that's why I'm here. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. We are going to go through this video. It's a video he did about Ozempic and how they're targeting body positive influencers for marketing, which we're going to cover this article in a future video. But for now, we're going to just listen to Tim Pool. I'm going to offer my critique. Okay, and remember, it's not personal and it's not political. This is just about fat activism. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch.
So, fat leftists are...
Okay, so we're starting strong. The first major pitfall of people who go into anti-FA spaces, or people who think about going into an anti-FA space, or even people who are talking about this in person and in public, one of the worst mistakes you can make is to politicize this issue. Fat acceptance is its own thing. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. Obesity, fatness, fat acceptance, although they co-opt a lot of the language of the far left, there is a sort of universal issue with this on all sides. This isn't something that is a left-right issue. There are plenty of conservatives, plenty of libertarians, plenty of people like that that have no issue being fat and that accept being fat. They may not push you to accept that they're fat, but they still accept it in themselves. And I think that that's still an issue, because part of why we're fighting this is not just to, fight these people personally. It's to change the culture and to change the messaging around obesity. So politicizing it is one of the worst things you can do, because you make it divisive when it actually isn't really a divisive issue, especially not politically. Typically, if you ask anybody across the aisle, should you be, healthy or not, they're going to say yes. And I think that that's really, really important. So I understand that Tim is a political commentator, so obviously he was going to fall into this pitfall, but it's really important, those of us that are going into the anti-FA genre, those of us who are in public, talking to people in our lives that perhaps believe in this rhetoric, it's very important not to politicize it. Do not bring politics into it. It's bigger than that. It's more important. It has to do with health. It has to do with a lot of different things, okay? Even the health of general society. So this is a bigger deal than, sort of timely political issues, in my opinion. This is a long-standing issue that's been getting worse for the past 40 years, okay? So I think it's really important that we talk about this, okay? In a non-political way. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care any of that. You know, it has nothing to do with your politics. I've said many times, I follow plenty of, lefty anti-FA creators. There's libertarian ones, there's conservative ones. I follow them all, okay? I don't care. I care about the messaging, and I care about if it's effective. That's what I care about. So let's continue.
Angry that they're getting advertisements on social media telling them to lose weight and offering them things like Ozempic. My friends, I am going to say this. It's a very, very important story, and I agree with these fat leftist influencers who are upset over receiving advertisements for Ozempic. I do not agree with them that being fat is good and you should embrace these things. I think you should strive to eat healthy, exercise, reduce your carbs, increase your protein. And
okay, so now we're going into the next one very, very fast. So the next one is there's always, or not always, but oftentimes an attack on carbs. Okay, so I need to explain this a bit. If you're a very, very fat person, okay, so I'm talking about like over 300 pounds, over 400 pounds. Okay, if you're very, very big. When a fat person hears that they should reduce carbs, they hear that they should reduce life. Now, there are a lot of issues in a fat person's body, one of them being a lack of energy. And carbohydrates are one of the easiest forms of energy. So if you tell a fat person not to eat carbs, they think, if I cut carbs, I'm going to feel like crap. I've done it before and it feels like crap. If I cut carbs, I'm going to be really hungry. If I cut carbs, I'm going to feel this, that, and the other. And so they'll typically immediately not listen after that. I think at this point, any fat person probably would already have either clicked off the video, and I'm not saying any fat person, I'm saying your typical lay person that's fat that is watching this video, they either would have clicked off or they would have immediately stopped listening to any advice that he had to say. So I'm not saying that you can't talk about, sugar has problems or this or that, but you have to be really clear when you talk about diet and when you talk about these things. Because when you say carbs, a very fat person is going to think all and any carbs at all. So that's immediately what they're going to think, because there is this sort of black and white attitude within a lot of very fat people, and it's something to be aware of, okay?
generality, if you're on an all-protein diet, disregard. Talk to a nutritionist, figure out which makes sense. But I think
the other issue is it's difficult when you make confusing advice. So he's already given like 2 or 3 different advice talking points. He said, go to a doctor, see what they say. Well, what if a doctor tells you that you should go on Ozempic? What if a doctor tells you that you should cut out all fat or all carbs or all this or all that, right? What if a doctor is giving just as unhelpful advice? It's difficult. It's a difficult situation. Most very, very fat people have gotten difficult advice from doctors, and a lot of doctors have hardly any training in nutrition, and it's important to realize that. So again, I'm not saying that going to doctor is bad or anything like that, but I always say we should question our doctors. We should have skepticism or even ask for other opinions, not take a doctor's word as gospel. That's something that you're going to see a lot in the United States. I don't think it's good. Other countries, there's a more collaborative effort when it comes to treatment and when it comes to figuring things out. And I think that it's actually better because it creates more of a buy-in from the patient rather than it being dictated to you. You try it, it doesn't work, then you never listen again. So it's the same issue. I'm not trying to say that, I'm trying to explain why this is getting worse and why this keeps happening and why these types of videos and this type of content is not helpful. So remember, when we're fighting against fat activism, we are fighting against not just fat activists on TikTok, but we're fighting against the ideas and we're fighting against things that have permeated the culture. And that's one of them. One of them is that don't eat carbs and you gotta listen to your doctor, even if your doctor told you the same, don't eat carbs, and you can't sustain it. It's a problem. It's an issue.
This story is absolutely fascinating because to me, the idea of taking a drug to lose weight is disgusting.
So now we're going into judgment. Judgment is not necessarily an effective way to get somebody to buy in, especially not in terms of dieting, obesity, anything like that. You have to understand that most very fat people have been judged for the fact that they're fat for the majority of their life. So they're basically immune to this type of reasoning. When somebody hears that taking Ozempic is disgusting, if they're personally taking it, they're going to feel really nervous. There's a lot of, when very, very big people try to lose weight, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of reticence. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things in which they're wondering if what they're doing is going to work. They're wondering if what they're doing is okay. They're wondering if what they're doing is going to get them to where they need to be and if they're going to be able to turn their health around. That is a difficult place to be in. It's very scary. And so when you hear things like it's disgusting, it creates that anxiety over it. I say on my channel that I think Ozempic should be taken as a last ditch effort. It should be taken as something when other things have failed, or if you're very, very big. And I'm talking like 500, 600, that level of weight, like very big. 400 pounds, like as a woman, right? That's kind of what I'm talking about, is when you're in those categories where any risks of Ozempic, they're a lot smaller than staying at that size. That's what's important. But it's important to also reiterate that if you take Ozempic, you still have to diet and exercise, and you still have to do all the other steps. The only reason you're taking Ozempic is to help you adhere. That's what should be said. That's good messaging about Ozempic. So that's something that people need to know. And you need to educate yourself about things like Ozempic if you're going to talk about it, because it's important.
Recreationally. I'll put it this way. If you're someone who's got a serious medical issue and your doctor prescribes a medication, hey, step aside. I'm not talking about you. I strongly encourage everybody to get sound medical advice from a medical professional. What I'm saying is there are people right now who eat garbage and are taking drugs so they don't get fat while they eat garbage.
So this is not 100% what it is. So it's not, the way that Ozempic works is that it actually reduces your appetite. So it's typically that you're eating drastically less. And the idea of eating garbage, as Tim puts, which is difficult because he doesn't define what garbage is, which I think is important to define, because again, as a fat person, you're hearing garbage. Garbage could mean anything to a fat person. What if they're thinking that eating meat is garbage? What if they're thinking that eating carbs is garbage? What if they're thinking that eating dairy is garbage, or anything? There's very nutritious foods in all those categories. And what if they're thinking, well, that's garbage, right? You have to understand too, there's a lot of miseducation in society about what is healthy and what isn't. There's a lot of fad diets that have gone on for many years. There's a lot of these things that are assumptions. So when you say something like garbage, you need to say what garbage is. That's important, because then I don't know what you're saying. And a fat person doesn't really know what you're saying. They're going to think of whatever they've already been pre-programmed to assume is garbage, which it typically doesn't actually help the person because they're still fat, or they've tried to cut it out and they couldn't for certain reasons.
Favorite commercial, meme, or whatever. It's this guy, and he's eating pizza, and it's like, can't eat your favorite foods? And he goes, oh, I got acid indigestion. And then it's like, take product. And it's like, He eats the pill and he's like, now I can eat more of my favorite food. And it's like, dude, if you're putting something in your body and it hurts, stop. Imagine.
Okay. So I can understand why people would say this, but there's a little bit more to it. So oftentimes people can tend to have intolerances because they have underlying inflammation or health issues. It's similar to how you can suddenly develop a food allergy, right? That does happen to people. And so it's important to understand that general inflammation and general issues around that are important to control and mitigate, because then if you do, you may reduce some of your intolerances. For example, as we talk a lot about on this channel, I am very hypothyroid, and it is through that hypothyroidism that I lost the ability to process gluten due to a lot of different factors, including the fact that bread in the United States is highly estrogenic, including the fact that I had lower stomach acid from being hypo and all these different things. So I cannot tolerate gluten anymore. But if I get my hypo under control and if I continue to lose weight, then I will be able to eat gluten again. And I think it's important for people to be able to eat as much as they can so that there's more variety. Otherwise, if you continue down a path of inflammation, you can continue to have to cut things out over and over and over again. This is a thought process that I went through a lot during my 20s, and I kept trying to eliminate, and it never worked. I never got there. And you can kind of paint yourself in a corner. It's tough. And then you can be in such a corner that you're not getting enough nutrition. So I understand the mindset, but it's not actually very effective. I think a good general thing to say as an anti-FA is that it's important to have appropriate amounts of calories and to be able to find a way to sustain a caloric deficit. That is the ultimate goal of anything that you do in order to lose weight. Find something where you can eat less and you don't get hungry. That's the key. That is the absolute key to losing weight.
I look to prominent influencers like the Petersons, Jordan and Michaela, because they've done elimination diet stuff. And Michaela's tremendous success with elimination diet, where she's mostly just eating rack of lamb.
Okay, so I will just say an elimination diet of that style, I can almost guarantee that basically anybody who's super morbidly obese, they will not be able to sustain that. Or if they are able to, the second they step off, they're going to gain all the weight back. It's not sustainable. It's very difficult. When you are super morbidly obese, your body is not strong. Your body doesn't process things like other people, and you can't handle these fasts. These elimination diets are basically fasts. When you're very, very sick, you need to be giving your body all kinds of nutrition, all kinds of nutrients, all kinds of macros in order to boost, especially thyroid function. And you need to not deprive yourself of any of those nutrients. So eating only lamb, I think, would be the worst thing ever for somebody who's 350 pounds. It would be incredibly difficult for them to sustain. They may drop a lot of weight through a huge reduction of calories, but they would probably be absolutely miserable, insomniatic. They probably would be hungry. They probably would essentially feel like they're dying for the most part. They might have a golden period where they feel a little bit better, but then over time you feel worse and worse, and then you ultimately cannot sustain it. And then the weight comes back on really easily because you've slowed your metabolism due to drastic elimination diets. I would not ever advise any anti-FA to suggest elimination diets of that sort. It is a terrible idea. It is not palatable to anybody. People will not hear that. They will not listen to you. They'll say, that's nice. I'm going to go get McDonald's. That's what they're going to say. Eating habits and things like that and certain ideas in culture, they have to change slowly. It's a slow process. There's been a lot of corporate messaging, a lot of fat acceptance messaging that we have to fight back, and it's going to take time.
And, I respect it. Figure out what works for you. We're all different. Here's what I see with this. These women are upset. They're getting ads telling them to lose weight. Now, I'm not right away when they're saying, I get these weight loss commercials. I'm like, well, that's a good thing. The drugs are the bad thing. Virgie Tovar has been a fat activist for more than a decade. So when she started receiving email after email from wellness companies offering weight loss drugs, she thought it was spam.
Okay. So I do want to say, too, he said there, Ozempic is a bad thing. So I think it's really important as an anti-FA to not always talk in black and whites. Okay. You don't want to say that because it's not always bad for everybody in every situation. Once again, I will say if Ozempic is saving your life, then I'm very happy that it is. But if Ozempic is not necessary, then I don't think it's necessarily worth the risk. Okay? So you really have to think about that yourself. And I think it's important to empower people to make decisions and health decisions in their lives, because a lot of times people don't. They don't make the decision themselves. And if they don't, then they don't stick to it, or they're not going to do it. Shame can only last so long, and most fat, very, very super morbid obese people are too fat for it to last the whole time. They get over it eventually. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that. So again, my goal here is for this to be over. Okay, I want this to stop. I know what keeps people fat. I know what kept me fat. I've talked to plenty of people, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm very, very aware of the issues that lead to this type of thing. And I fought every single barrier you could possibly fight. I think my life is like the most horrific, typical example of super morbid obesity ever. And I am seeing all the different things and how to get past them. But in terms of like what would have actually changed my mind, it wouldn't have been shaming. It wouldn't have been saying to cut out a macronutrient. It wouldn't have been saying to do an elimination diet. And he does say, do what you want or do what works for you. Do what works for you. That's fine, but it's more of a disclaimer to his overall message. His overall message was to do an elimination diet, to cut out carbs, right? That was his overall message. And people hear that, especially if they're a fan of you. So it does matter what you say. And it does matter if you're in their life and you have something to say. Like I had a friend, he really, really wanted me to try veganism again in 2018. And I thought, I guess I could try it because he was my friend. It was a horrible idea. It made me so much worse, and I gained so much weight being a vegan because once again, I couldn't not be hungry. So I ate many, many calories because I was starving on a vegan diet. That obviously put me in a worse position. So again, what we suggest, it does have power, especially to people that we can influence or people that are close to us in our lives. And I would say it's very important to focus on the right issue. Now on this channel, I always talk about the seed oil consumption. It is a major, major part of obesity. It has skyrocketed every single decade since it hit the market back in the early 1900s. So it has been skyrocketing over 100 years, and we've reached a point now where it has caused so much obesity because there's such a high percentage of calories coming from these oils in the American diet especially. So I will point that out. I understand that people don't want to hear it because it does involve making a huge change, especially as a super morbidly obese person, because typically a super morbidly obese person is eating many, many, many of these oils in the forms of takeout, fast food, fried foods, chips, right? Horrible. So I think it's important to push those as a message rather than carbs or meat, because those are not actually bad for you. The seed oils are. So again, not everybody knows that. But once again, if you don't know enough about nutrition, then just say you need to get to a healthy caloric deficit in a way that is sustainable for you, that you won't be too hungry, however that looks. And I say that myself, Because just because I say not to eat seed oils, that doesn't mean I tell you guys how much meat to eat, how much carbs to eat, how much any of that to eat. That's up to you, and that's how your body feels and how your body works. I can tell you what a typical person would need, and that's all I can do, especially a typical fat person. But that's all I can do. And I do suggest eating meat, carbs, saturated fat, these things. They keep you sustained and full. But again, I can't tell you the amounts. You have to figure that out yourself. Figure out where you can get into that caloric deficit. Because there's going to be a ratio that works for you. And if it doesn't work anymore, then change it. And that's how you get out. And everybody's different. So that's the other aspect of this, is we do have to acknowledge that people are different and they're going to need different things at different times. And it's difficult to dictate to people what they should do. And that's why I don't typically do it that much. But I will say that one thing about the seed oils, because that is universal.
It wasn't until she saw other creators share screenshots of communications from marketing companies and medical spas that it started to register. It was a widespread phenomenon. Yes, the reality is most people want to lose weight. That's why Ozempic has become so big. So, of course, there are companies that make tons of money off advocating weight loss, and they're going to market to you because you are fat. But as a fat leftist, you are offended by it. I'll let you in on a secret. I met a guy who told me, I met a rich guy once.
Okay. So this issue that he's going to do now is he kind of goes off topic, and he talks a lot about like making money and how you can make money on Facebook and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit off topic, which that typically happens with political commentators because, and again, I'm talking left, right, center, everything, right? Because they don't actually care that much about this issue, which is why in a lot of ways, like, I'm not going to say that I wish they would refrain, but I kind of do, low key, because it's not actually helpful if you don't really know what you're talking about and if you don't actually care about the issue. It seems to me that Tim is using this as an opportunity to simply attack the left, to simply attack leftists, as he says, which of course he will do. He's a political commentator. People will attack the other side of wherever they're at, right? But ultimately, fatness, Ozempic, fat acceptance, this is not a device. It should not be used as a device, a political pawn. This is people's lives. This is very important. And you can't look at a crowd of people, see who's fat and who isn't, and know who's left and who's right. So it doesn't even make sense rhetorically either. It doesn't make sense on any level to politicize weight loss, to politicize Ozempic or anything like that, other than from a corporate level, because it is a corporate push. And that is what I talk about, because it is interesting that they are pushing Ozempic onto fat acceptance influencers. And again, we will read this article in a separate video because I actually do feel that I would have a lot to say about that.
She said F all the way off. I agree. However, similarly, plus-sized Peloton instructor Ash Pryor also shared a screenshot of an email she received offering $1,500 worth of weight loss medication treatment in exchange for a monthly content. That's when she said F all the way off. Here's what people need to do.
Isn't that crazy? So we will read that. That'll be my next one.
Eat better, exercise more.
That's fair. That's a good advice. It's just, again, what does eat better mean? So a simple-ish way to say to eat better is eat an appropriate caloric amount within a ratio of macros that you can sustain while avoiding seed oils. That's like a very short sentence. I know it's kind of weird, but that would actually be very helpful. That's a very, very helpful message to fat people. If most fat people heard that their whole lives, they would not be fat anymore. Okay, I'm just saying.
I lost like 30 pounds when I dropped the carbs, increased the protein.
So this is another pitfall. So comparing something like 30 pounds to somebody like Virgie Tovar, it's not smart. It's very, very different. I think a lot of people view weight loss as linear or as the same from very big to very small. It doesn't live up to that in reality, though. When you're very, very big, as we know, you are very ill when you're very big. Your body doesn't digest food the same anymore. Your brain doesn't work the same anymore. People who are very, very fat, they tend to be more sensitive. They tend to have higher black and white thinking. They tend to, you know, you tell them don't eat carbs and they think I should go hardcore keto and never eat a carb again. That's the mindset that very fat people will typically have. And you see this a lot with fat acceptance influencers, where they will talk about how they can't go on a diet because they don't want to just eat their celery sticks and that's it. That's a very black and white way of thinking, right? So they think if I go on a diet, then that means I can only eat celery and hummus. And that's not true. But if you don't say that, if you don't make it clear, then they're not going to hear that. Okay?
This was now going on, I think, like, man, it's 2.5 years ago. I was heavier. I was eating a lot of rice. I was eating a lot of meat, but I was eating way more carbs, bread, and I was exercising a lot. And then I was like, I gotta, for me, the problem was the carbohydrates, mostly rice. I was having a lot of rice.
So remember, it's not carbohydrates, it's an excess of calories, okay? It also does depend on what you put on the rice. If you put a sauce that had those seed oils in it, it's a very bad combination to combine carbs and seed oils. That's why fried food is especially inflammatory and especially bad for you, because it tends to combine starchy carbs with polyunsaturated fatty acids, which is very negative for metabolic health, and it is massively inflammatory and weight gain inducing. So that could be what you're having. If you're having fried rice, for example, Tim, that would be absolute weight gain city. It would make you gain a lot of weight. But also, rice is very easy to eat a lot of, and you could throw down a lot of calories really fast if you're eating a lot of rice. So that could be an aspect as well that made you gain weight.
And I was like, I don't want to eat too much bread, but I had a lot of rice. And so I dropped it all and started focusing more on protein. And I did keto, basically. And I lost like 20 pounds in 3 months.
It's important to understand, too, though, that when you do keto, you lose a lot of water weight. So anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds of that weight loss could be from water. And water is not metabolically active in the same way as fat is. It has less to do with your health. It's not good to carry around a lot of water, but carbs can help maintain a healthy balance of hydration. So, and especially sodium retention, which when people go keto, like I remember when I went keto, there were certain moments where I was so deep in keto, I could not retain sodium. And therefore I couldn't retain any water. I would try to drink water and it would come out as diarrhea within 5 minutes. And I was starting to get so dehydrated that I had to eat carbs that day because I couldn't rehydrate, because I just couldn't keep the water in my body long enough to actually digest and do something. So again, that's a drastic example, but it is a reality. Keto is extremely dehydrating. So that could be a part of your weight loss. Okay? So your weight loss may be a little bit exaggerated. I'm not saying it's completely exaggerated, because I'm sure you reduced your calories a lot when you became keto. But overall, it's the caloric reduction that led to the weight loss, not a reduction in carbs.
And then over the next like 5 or 6 months, I lost another 10 pounds. I had been exercising the whole time. I've always skateboarded. At the time, I was doing a bit more.
That's good. Exercise is always good, pretty much, if you can do it. I think exercise is a major part of any weight loss effort. A lot of people say that it doesn't matter that much, but I really think it does.
Rollerblading than skateboarding. Rollerblading, super fun. I think it's easier to get started. Skateboarding is a lot harder, but I've been skateboarding a lot more recently. So exercise definitely helped. But my attitude was kind of like, I don't know. I exercise all the time, but I still put on weight. And then I was like, it's diet.
Too high calories.
It's not. And I think diet is the majority, although exercise is extremely important.
That's actually a good message. You should always say exercise is important. It's not about the caloric reduction of exercise. It's about the metabolic effects. It's about the effects it has on your hormones. It's about also, in part, creating a more sustainable way of losing weight. It's much better to burn fat off than to starve it off in terms of weight loss and metabolic health. If you're burning it off, it speeds up your metabolism a bit rather than just eating below your BMR. That will possibly slow your metabolism. So I always suggest when you get to the point where you can sustain a pretty hefty caloric deficit, I would say eat your BMR and then work off the fat. That's what I do, and it has worked very well for me. And I am very active, but I think it is good to be active. It's important. I think you should be walking every day. I think you should be, living your life every day, right? If you can, and do the best you can with how healthy you are. I understand that not everybody is healthy, but that's very important. That has been a huge part of my recovery.
I think much of what we hear about depression, if you're depressed, the solution may actually be exercise. I'm not saying it's the only and absolute, talk to a doctor, but for a lot of people, it has been medically, scientifically proven exercise cures a lot of depression. My recommendation to a lot of people is if you're depressed in the house, you don't know what to do, you're bored, you have nothing to do, go to a skate park. Get a skateboard. You've never skateboarded before. Get rollerblades. You've never bladed before. Skateboard's probably easier to meet people with because less people rollerblade. But you go to a skate park with a skateboard, and that's it. You go to the skate.
Yeah, so if you were super morbidly obese, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. I would suggest just walking. I think one of the biggest things, and I do see a lot of anti-FAs, they talk about walking, and it's very good. I think you should always mention walking. I think it is one of the most natural ways of losing weight. It's one of the most natural things to do with our bodies if we can walk, obviously with that caveat. But in terms of activity, it's an accessible activity. It's something that you can tell a fat person that you can work towards being able to walk, and they'll usually consider it a lot more because it's so accessible compared to skateboarding or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with skateboarding, but a lot of fat people will hear that and they'll be like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. Right? So I think it's important that we get the right message to the right person, if that makes any sense. So that would be another pitfall, is you making assumptions that a very big person can do the things that you can do, because they probably can't. I'm just keeping it real, okay? So that can fall on deaf ears.
Skateboard, you'll sit down, and it's just proximity. This is always how it goes. You go to a skate park, you sit down, someone will walk over like, what's going on, man? You'll be like, yo, what's up?
This could prevent somebody from becoming super morbidly obese. This could prevent somebody from becoming too fat. So if you are kind of chunky, I think this would actually be really, really good advice to kind of get involved, get some hobbies that are active. It can save you. It can be life-changing in terms of preventing obesity, right? So that's a very good idea, and I might actually incorporate that. So see, we can always learn from anybody, You'll
watch someone do a trick, and it'll be like, oh, did you see that? And you know what you can do? You can say, hey, man, I'm new. I just started skating. I want to get into it. You think you can give me some pointers? They'll be like, oh, for sure, dude. You'll make friends instantly, and it will be very, very good for you. And then I love skateboarding. I don't care if it's skateboarding or anything else. I love community sports stuff, right? Football's cool, but a lot of people just watch. I like I like when you go out, you have a league and you play ultimate frisbee, frisbee golf, snowboarding, anything where you're out interacting with people and being physical. It is going to light up your life.
I don't think that that's bad advice. For me as an introvert, it makes me want to die a little bit, but that's just me. I'm just, introvert queen over here. but I don't need to be around other people to be active. Like, I just love walking, and I actually do like going to the gym when I can. I can't yet. It's still winter, but I'm waiting till winter ends. But when I can, I actually do enjoy it. I enjoy weightlifting. I enjoy being alone. I enjoy being active alone. Um, but I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said. I'm just saying you don't have to if you don't want to. So
I recommend it. That's what bothers me about all this. What I'm seeing these days, which is terrifying, is that people have disgusting diets where they eat processed garbage and fake sugar. And when it causes them physical pain, they buy a drug to solve the problem. That's crazy.
okay, I can see what he's saying, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So I would say that kind of statement is something you're going to hear really commonly in anti-FA. I think it's like a midline statement. I would take it a step further and say what tends to happen is people, they usually go to fast food. They eat the fast food. They eat the chips, right? They start having these processed garbage, as he says, which I think is, it's okay. It's an okay term. I think it's better to be more specific. I think it's better to say fast food, chips. I think it's better to call out things like that. But people, they tend to eat those foods. They tend to put on a little bit of weight, and then they try to go to somewhere to lose weight. They try to find help. They talk to their doctor. The doctor tells them to cut out a macronutrient or to cut out a nutrient completely. They'll say don't eat any saturated fat, for example. And that creates a lot of imbalances pretty much from the beginning. And so they start buying things like low-fat milk or non-fat milk. They start getting, non-fat everything. And what tends to happen is your seed oil consumption will tend to go up. And when that happens, and then your sugar tends to go up too, then that means your calories go up a lot more because you're a lot less satiated. That's like a very typical pathway for a fat person. That's how a lot of people in my generation became fat. It was you eat the bad food, you gain a little bit of weight, you go to the doctor, they say don't eat saturated fat. You say, okay, I won't have saturated fat, then I'll just have a lot of sugar. That's how people think. And then they eat a bunch of sugar and they eat a lot of seed oils, and then they gain a lot of weight. Then it gets worse. Then you try another diet, or you try to go to Weight Watchers or something. They tell you the same advice. Don't eat any saturated fat. Okay, then you try not to. And then you're starving, and then you end up putting on more weight. Then you try something like veganism. There's a lot of fat activists that are vegan because you keep kind of going along that path. So then they don't eat meat anymore. And maybe they lose some weight initially, but then eventually they're starving and they eat a lot of Oreos and they start eating a lot of vegan takeout. And you see that kind of thing. And then they start ballooning up even further. And then they think, well, I'm vegan, I'm eating healthy. Even though I'm eating a huge amount of seed oil consumption, I'm eating healthy. I don't know why I'm fat. I guess I've been lied to my whole life. I guess I should be a fat activist. So that's a very typical pathway to becoming a fat activist. The other way is through keto. So you'll either take that vegan path or you'll take the keto path. And the keto path is a little different. The keto path, you'll start to become keto. You'll try to cut out carbs. And you'll usually gain and lose the same 80 pounds however many times you try it. That's a very typical way for somebody that is, super morbidly obese. They would lose, it's around that 80-pound mark that it starts to become an issue, typically. That doesn't mean for everybody. Some people can push past it, but most people can't. And so you gain and lose the same 80 pounds, and then eventually you try to do keto again, and you don't lose as much. And then you fail again, then you do it again, and you lose even less. And then eventually you give up because you think, well, keto is the only way for me to lose weight, and keto isn't working anymore, so I guess I'm just meant to be fat, or I guess I can't do it. So then you accept it. You may not talk about it on TikTok, but you still accept it. And that's how you get there. Those are the typical paths for a lot of people. Okay? So we need to change that path. That's what I'm trying to do here.
And it breaks my heart. For me, I find it to be relatively simple. I would love, so we had a Super Bowl party, tons of pizza. I ordered these keto pizzas. I regret it. I will never do it again. Too much dietary fiber, if you know what that does to you. And so I'm like, dude, I will just...
It's probably like cauliflower, cauliflower, seed oil, cauliflower crust, pretty much. So it's very hypo-inducing. Not good. It's total junk food. There's no point. It's just as bad.
Go ahead and eat meat. And so the other day, I did have some bread. We did tenderloin, Nusret style. We can never recreate the amazing...
So what's interesting to me too is a lot of keto people, they will occasionally eat bread, but they'll never eat fruit. And the opposite is actually what you should do. You should eat fruit. And if you want to reduce carbs, then cut out bread or grains because they're not as ideal, especially for weight loss. Doesn't mean you have to. I'm just saying in general, ratio-wise, it's easier for you to lose weight if you have less grains and less starches and have more fruit. Then it will be easier. It's more satiating. It's more hydrating, right? It's balanced with vitamins and minerals in a way that grains aren't. So that kind of thing is a lot better, but most keto people won't. They'll eat the bread and they won't eat fruit. It's very interesting to me.
Meal that is Nusret. If you don't know what that is, it's the Salt Bay guy where he does the thing with the salt. My stars and garters. If you ever find yourself in Miami and you've got some disposable income, Nusret is an experience. That guy knows what he is doing. It's the Salt Bay guy, right? It's probably I'm gonna say it right now, probably my favorite restaurant. And I don't know if there's one out here, but they do this thing where they pan-sear tenderloin in butter. They salt it.
Lots of saturated fat, which is good. It helps. It's satiating, okay, which is very important. However, it would be good to have some fruit with a meal like that too. You don't have to have a ton of it, and you don't have to have a ton of meat or steak either. Like I said, your macros, it's up to what your body needs. So maybe you need a little bit of steak and a lot of fruit that day, or maybe you need less fruit and a lot of steak that day. I think it's important to just follow your body in that sense, but count your calories. Because at the end of the day, your calories are what determine your weight.
And then they put a piece of bread between it, a toasted bread with butter. It's just nuts. I've talked about how good it is for a while. But I don't eat too much of the bread, but just the meats. And so I got to be honest. Super Bowl party, we had delicious yellow cake. I had not a single piece. And I'm like, man.
Cake is usually really bad. It usually has a lot of seed oils in it. You know when you make a cake and you put that whole thing of vegetable oil? It's awful. That is very weight gain city. Very, very bad for thyroid hormones. It's much better to use butter. Just use butter.
That icing would be so good, but I got to switch.
But people are weird because they'll be like, well, I don't want to eat butter because that's bad for you. So I'll put vegetable seed oil in it instead because I don't want to have too much fat. It's so weird. Isn't it weird how people think? That's the kind of thought processes that I'm trying to change because it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't.
No sugar for me. No fruit juice, none of that. I drink Spindrifts, cut the sugar down because
See?
The responsibility starts with you.
No fruit juices. And I think it would benefit him if he drank those because he's been keto for so long. It's tough. I don't think you have to. I understand that it's a hyperpalatable type of food, but for a super morbidly obese person, fruit juice can be a lifeline. It can be major energy for them because it's super easy to digest, and most super morbidly obese people have terrible digestion. So it's like, I don't know. I think people don't understand those things. They really don't.
And I want to be healthy. You know, they say as you get older, your body starts to break down faster than it can repair itself. And that means you want to maximize regeneration and minimize the damage from eating bad food. But too many of these people, of these women, are happy to be morbidly obese, sickly, and it breaks my heart. You know, this woman here, she's got a belly. She's obese. I don't understand why she doesn't just cut out the garbage. And there are people who say, but I like eating my sugar and my pizza and my whatever. And I'm just like, there's a lot of things that feel good. Drugs feel good. They kill you. They're like,
Okay, so I think it's important to like, I don't like the comparison of drugs to food because it's not the same at all. Like drugs are a lot more addictive than food is. And it is a major pitfall of anti-FA where they will make this comparison. But how many food addicts do you know that just easily lose the weight or stop and then lose the weight? Like I know a lot of people that are that way. Typically people who get hugely fat, they tend to have BED, which is a major psychological issue, which is not an addiction, it's an ED. So you wouldn't call Anna an addiction, you would call it an ED. That's the same thing with BED. So I think when we don't think about it in the proper way, or when we don't look at the fat person and see what the issue actually is, then we can't solve the problem. Because for a long time, I thought that my eating was like an addiction. I called it an addiction, but it wasn't. It was an ED. And so all I had to do was work through the emotional issues that I had, that I was using the ED to cope with, and get over my anxiety by getting out, living life, doing things. And the combination of those two things brought about the end of my BED. And it's very important to actually attack the issue for what it is. If you do have a food addiction, if you're like Michelle McDaniel and you just love hot Cheetos, like she always talks about, you typically will start losing the weight when you start having health issues, because it's not that strong of an addiction. So I think it's important to just be aware of what is going on with people. And typically people who are very big, they tend to have hormonal issues or they have BED. That's typically why. It's usually those two when you get hugely fat. And BED is a major issue. It's completely misunderstood. And it's a lot more common than people think.
you know, it's crazy that people like alcoholism is bad. Getting drunk feels good. You have to have control, responsibility. It is terrifying to me that there are people who are like, I am going to eat processed, refined garbage and sugar cakes and all that stuff, and then inject myself with chemicals to stop the negative. That's crazy. It makes me feel like there's going to be two worlds, or that we're in two worlds already. People who will become disgusting blobs of unhealth, but they'll just hook themselves up to the machine. For what purpose? I have no idea. And there will be others who will get fit, protect themselves, and try and improve themselves. And that's basically what we've seen. Think about where that goes. These people are going to...
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I'm not sure what his purpose is for this. I don't necessarily disagree. Like, I do think that there are a lot of people that are diving into obesity, but we know ultimately that if somebody dives into obesity, that they're going to die, ultimately. So I don't think that they'll be around. And that's the honest truth. And that's really scarring to say, but we've seen it. We've seen people passing away from obesity-related issues a lot. So I don't necessarily think that it's like that. Like, Ozempic isn't going to save you from obesity. Like, you have to be not obese. Does that make sense? So I think that part is interesting, but I just wonder, it's like, are you trying to change the direction, Tim? What are you trying to do? That's what I find with a lot of political commentators, whether it's, you know, someone like Tim Pool, somebody like Hassan, right? They just kind of say kind of platitudes and they don't really offer any solutions. They don't really say anything. It's just kind of saying nothing, you know, which is why I don't suggest political commentators talk about it, because it's not a political issue. It's a cultural issue. So it's a little different. And I get that there's overlap, but, you know, the anti-FA girlies, I think we're better equipped, and boilies, I like to say that too, but I think we're better equipped for this because it's more our focus rather than political people, because it's not their focus. So it's just interesting to see.
Themselves into the VR. They're going to be morbidly obese, disgusting, you know, covered in pots and boils and rashes. Their hair's going to fall out. And they're going to be like, I'm kept alive by chemicals plugged into my belly. And I use virtual reality. And then in the VR, they're this glistening, ripped Superman type figure. And there'll be the rest of us who will just be like, okay, you know, we're not going to be glistening, shiny models with six packs. That's not a real human body. You know, I respect the body positivity in its truest sense. Like, everyone's like, a dad bod. And I'm like, look, a guy who is like in moderate shape, has a little belly or whatever, I ain't complaining about. Not everybody's running on the treadmill and eating 500 grams of protein to look like Chris Hemsworth. You don't have to do that. There was a photo of, what's his face? The guy who plays Aquaman.
So that is a good talking point. I'm actually happy he said that, because it's important to keep things attainable, right? So, and I think you can attain any health that you want. Like I personally, I have a very lofty fat percentage goal. But as far as my channel and as far as what I would pressure somebody else into, my goal is to push men to be 24.9% body fat, which is totally attainable, and to push women to be 29.9% body fat, which is totally attainable. Okay? I think it's important to have those realistic or easy, even relatively easy goals, to understand what it is we're actually advocating for. Like, I don't care if everybody looks like a model. I don't really care. You know, I personally, I want to have a very ideal body fat percentage. I want to get to 17 eventually. That will take many years, but it's because that is a fit body fat percentage, and I feel like I need to be as fit as I can to counteract the horrific obesity and almost death of 2020 that I went through, in order to just, you know, kind of even it out. Does that make sense? That's my view, and that's how I view my body, and that's my goal for those reasons. But it's mostly because of all the damage I did. I feel like I need to put my body in the easiest, nicest position possible for the rest of my life. And that's my goal. It doesn't have to be your goal, but it is what it is, right? But yeah, I'm really glad he said that. So that's actually a huge plus that he said that. I think that's really important.
Momoa, whatever his name is. And they were like, look how fat he's gotten. Because he had like, it looked like he had like love handles or whatever. And I'm like, he didn't really. It's just that what we see on TV and movies of the guys who are super ripped in their muscles, they're dehydrated. And
Yeah.
so when this dude who works out a lot, gets fit for the movies, eats a ton of protein, in reality, he does not look like a six-pack ripped guy that you see on TV. That's like special circumstance filming. And they make fun of him. So I get that. It's like, come on, dude. That's what a person actually looks like. Calm the F down. When they do filters and manipulate how people look, how women look, to try and sell a product, that's bad. So I don't mind the women on Instagram when they're like, this is what Instagram looks like, and here's how I really...
So this is good. This is good messaging. I think that this is reasonable. I think this would come across to a lot of fat people very well. It's just a shame that it's buried so far into the video when there's already been a lot of pitfalls. So I would say definitely start with the better things earlier. Okay?
Look, and it's like, I respect it. You know, it's kind of cringe they keep doing it, so we get it. But the filter stuff is really bad. So in the terms of body positivity of like, sometimes people have zits, sometimes, you know, people, you know, they're short or whatever. It's like, that's great. That's body positivity. But morbidly obese people who won't take responsibility for their own health, who want to do drugs instead, that is not body positivity. And that's actually what's happening right now. Now, again, to be fair, These women are just saying, like, I'm fat and that it is what it is. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You could be thin if you just ate better. Exercise.
You ate less. Yeah. Even if you eat better, if you eat the same, you'll stay the same weight, but it still helps. It can help you get to a point where you can eat a deficit later on. That's what I had to do because I was so damaged. My metabolism was so bad that I had to just eat nutritiously for 1.5 years, and then I could start losing after that. So that could be a step for a lot of people who are in a very bad position health-wise. But you typically, no matter what, you're going to have to cut your calories. That's ultimately what determines your weight.
And changed your life, and it would improve your mental status and all these things. But you know what, man? I'm libertarian, I guess, so do what you want to do. Me, I'll do what I want to do. So, the other day I have very little carbs every day. And this is wild because I'm reading online. I consulted.
Good. It's not at all good. But I'll hold my judgment for something else. But I don't think it's good.
Like health websites, government, and World Health Organization kind of things. How much protein should I eat? How many carbs? How much fat? It is insane, in my opinion, what they tell people to eat. No joke. It says apparently I should be eating 300 carbohydrates per day. Dude, I eat like 20.
That's way too low. I think it should be 100. I think it should be at least 100, in my opinion, at least. But I would say 300 is very high, for somebody who's not fat. But I think he needs to kind of, it's like you're almost there, Tim. You see it. So I think it's important to put that same thought process onto very, very big people. So they've been given this advice. Think about it. They've been given the same advice. And you decided, I'm not going to listen to it and I'm going to do something different. Well, a lot of fat people say, okay, I tried it. It's not working. Now I'm going to try something different. And they go down various paths. And a lot of those paths don't work either, especially for very big people. And so they don't know what to do. Who do you listen to if you can't listen to the government or whatever? If they're not giving you good advice? At least take that same logic and put it towards other people. They've had the same experience. I was told by a doctor to not have any saturated fat, and it was probably the worst, absolute worst diet advice I've ever received in my entire life. And it set me up for a lot of problems. What I really needed, I needed to just not eat fast food anymore. As somebody in elementary school or early junior high, I just needed to not eat fast food. I needed to probably go to therapy and deal with my more moderate or mild BED at the time and turn it around before it became severe in high school. But instead, I was told to eat no saturated fat. It made me a lot hungrier. And ultimately, I didn't go to therapy or anything, and things just snowballed. The hungrier I was, the more weight I gained, the more weight I gained, the more I hated my body, the worse my BED was. And it just created this loop. The more I hated my body, the more I couldn't relate to other people. The more I couldn't relate to other people, the more I hated myself. The more I hated myself, the more I ate. The more I ate, the more hypo I became, because it's like you're eating all that junk food and it messes up your metabolism. That just repeated for years. Then I tried dieting, and the more diets I did, it just made me more and more hypo with every diet I tried. And then I'd eventually go back to binging, and then it just kept getting worse and worse until I almost died. I almost died before 30. And so it's like, I'm not going to sit here and, it's like you got to think about what leads people to those paths. If you are eating food because you're emotionally triggered on an almost daily basis, you have severe BED. If you are eating so much that you have to throw up, you have BED. If you're eating so much that you're in pain very often, then you have BEG and you need to figure it out. And people don't think of it, and it's not an addiction. It's a coping mechanism, typically for anxiety and emotional trauma. It just sucks. It really sucks. It's very tragic. But anyways,
It's wild. When I weighed 200 pounds a couple of years ago, and I lost 30. When I weighed 200, I was probably eating like 100 carbs per day, some bread and some rice, nowhere near 300. And I was gaining weight, and I've got a mini ramp in the basement we've had the whole time we were here, and I was gaining.
your calories were too high, Tim. I don't know how many times I have to say this. Were you eating 1 cup of rice, or were you eating 10 cups of rice? Your calories were too high. It wasn't the carbs, it's the calories. I don't know what is with people, or they can't acknowledge that.
I don't really care. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I don't care what I look like, whatever. And then at a certain point, I was kind of like, after I got sick, I said, I gotta eat better. Whatever it is, I should not be gaining weight if I'm exercising. Something's wrong. And I think maybe it's just me. Maybe everybody's different. But I switched to lots of protein, lots of fat. And it's wild because it's like, for one thing, even recently, I was not getting enough protein. And now I'm getting a ton of protein, and I've dramatically cut out carbs. Here's the thing. There's something called, I think it's called gluconeogenesis.
This is something that keto people will say all the time, but it's very difficult for the body to do. And it's drastically more difficult if you have a fatty liver, which most super morbidly obese people have a fatty liver because your liver has to create the glucose out of protein. And if your liver is fatty, then it's not functioning very well. So it's actually very difficult to do this as a super morbidly obese person.
Your body will turn protein into sugar when it needs it. So that's why people are like, I'm doing the keto diet, and they eat like a big steak, and I'm like, that's not keto. Keto is when you slam a glass of heavy whipping cream, and your calories come mostly from fat, not from protein and sugar. I'm mostly doing low carb, high fat, high protein, but not there's still some carbs in there. I wouldn't call it legit keto. Everyone calls it keto, but dude, seriously, you're eating avocados, cheese, drinking cream, and you're having a little bit of protein. That's keto. I'm doing just a higher protein, higher fat, lower carb thing relative to what they're telling me to do, and I've never felt better. I mentally feel bad. I do. Because I'm like, if I had known this when I was 19, man, what could I have accomplished? I remember when I was a teenager and into my 20s, I would skate. And I'm in California, and I ollie down, I jumped down a large set of stairs. Huge. I mean, not really. It was 13. So imagine a set of stairs that has 13 stairs. It's about 6 to 7 feet tall. And I jumped off of it. Heavy impact. It took several tries to finally get it. And this was when I was 19 or something. I think I was 18. And so lot of strain on my muscles and my legs. The next day, I was racked with soreness. I could not skate for 5 days. I was so sore. And I was like, man, if only I knew now what I knew then. The issue was I wasn't getting enough protein. It was it. I needed to hydrate, get protein, and the soreness would have gone away very, very quickly.
Protein, I think it is important if you're exercising, of course. But carbs are important too, and so is fat. They're all important. So I don't know.
I didn't know that. And so I remember my whole life, I was like, how do I improve? I'm trying to figure out the diet thing. And it was because I kept getting told by all of these outlets, eat carbs and have X amount of protein, but more carbs. And that wasn't doing it for me. Now.
Yeah, it's perhaps just genetically you're not meant to have that many carbs, which, like I said, I don't dictate to people what to eat carb-wise, protein-wise, etc. There have been times in this journey where I needed less protein, times in this journey where I needed more protein, times in this journey where I needed less carbs, more carbs, less and more fat. In the very beginning, I needed a lot of everything because I was dying. And now I'm I would say I'm probably more moderately carb now. I'd say I'm like moderately carb, higher fat, moderate protein. That's kind of where I'm at right now, and it's working pretty good for me. I feel pretty good in terms of like weight loss, and especially with my ability to maintain my caloric deficit. It's been pretty good now, but that's, again, I've been 100 different people. I've done 100 different diets within this one thyroid protocol. You know, it's like, because in different phases I've needed different things, and I don't need as many carbs now. So I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't need drastic amounts of carbs, or if there was a genetic component where he just needed less, and that's fine. But that's why I don't think we can depend on these outside authorities as much, you know, as we think we can.
Do more protein and less carbs, I'm not even sore. I skated 3 days in a row the past few days. And I'm just like, I'm 37, I'm about to be 38, and I'm skating better than I've ever skated. It's really funny because people are like, you're going to start to feel it now that you're getting to 40. And I'm like, I got to be honest, I'm skating better than I've ever skated. And that's why I'm like, man, if I was younger and I had a better diet, I mean, granted, I was poor, so I ate what I could eat. I would eat what I could eat. You know, I'd go to Wendy's and I'd order a double cheeseburger, but I'd be like, how much lettuce and tomato can you put on it? And they'd be like, I don't care, as much as you want. I'm like, okay, can I get 5 tomatoes and 5 lettuce? Then I would basically have this massive thing. And they're like, whatever. An onion. And I'm like, cram as much food on it as you can, because I only have $1. But now, you know, now that I'm taking protein more seriously and cutting the carbs out, things have been way better. Anyway, now I'm ranting about health and fitness, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I feel good about it. This stuff bums me out. This stuff makes me sad, I got to say. I wish people would do better and we weren't moving towards this.
Yeah, I do too, but unfortunately, I don't think the advice in this video is going to make anything change. And that's what bothers me, you know? So I think when we are anti-FAs, when we are fighting this rhetoric, it's important to think about the goal. It's important to think about, what am I trying to change? What am I trying to make people see differently in their minds? If there is nothing that you're trying to change, I guess, you know, you're just trying to make fun of fat people or something. I don't think that that's as ideal. If it's just about your own self-aggrandizement, I don't think that that's as ideal either. I think this issue is so big and all-encompassing that we do need to push back on it as much as we can. So I'm going to continue to do so, but in ways that change the conversation, which I've talked a lot about in this video.
Hurts to eat pizza, but I'll take drugs so I can. Man, like, have a mango or a yogurt or whatever. Just like.
So I thought he was against carbs. He's okay with mango. You know, it's confusing. It's a little confusing, but, you know.
It's so brutal. Me, I mostly eat chicken wings. I eat a lot of chicken wings. I try not to do too much red meat, but I will add this. I've actually never felt better than when I eat salami. Yeah, for real. It's the craziest thing.
Salami is red meat. Red meat is very nutritious, but
I will eat a bunch of salami with, we have this.
It's probably because of the fat and the salt. That's probably why it feels better.
Roasted red pepper feta dip that is delicious. It's basically cream cheese with feta and red pepper in it.
And then it has some seed oils in it, Tim. Gotta get the hypo going. I'm sorry, I'm calling him out. I think Tim is hypo. I've been wanting to say that the whole video, but I'm just saying, I do. I think he is.
Get the salami in it. High fat, high protein, no carb, very salty. But the next day I feel like $1,000,000. And I'm wondering if it's because it's a cured meat. It's not, it's a raw meat, but it's cured. And so I'm like, I wonder if it's that it's raw. Raw is better. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Jeez. I swear, you guys.
I certainly recommend everybody who wants to pursue any changes to their diet consult someone who knows better than I do, because I'm just some dude who goes to the internet and tries to do better. But I've certainly found what works for me. Hopefully you can find.
Does it, Tim? Does it? Sorry. Okay.
Works for you. I'll leave it there.
I don't believe it, Tim. I'm sorry. I don't believe him. Anyways, you guys, Sorry. Sorry. I call out the hypo. There are some people that are hypo and they're not even fat, really. That happens. Taylor Swift, she's another hypo. She's a hypo queen. I love Taylor. I love to hate Taylor. I'm just kidding. I'm a major Swiftie, though. I'm a skeptical Swiftie. I'm a critical Swiftie. But she's hypo as hell. I can tell. I can see it. But it takes one to know one, I guess. But yeah, I would just be wary of that type of thing. And, regardless of my hypo talk, I want to go ahead and say that I hope that this video educated on some of the possible pitfalls, some of the things that we could do wrong. I think it's important to be reasonable. It's important to not shame, not judge. Don't use black and white statements. It's important to just, hone in on calories. That's really big. And just say, you got to find the right macros for you so you can ultimately sustain a healthy caloric deficit to lose the weight and avoid seed oils. That would be really helpful. It's a very easy sentence, which seed oils are in a lot of processed foods. So if you would rather say avoid processed foods because you're more comfortable with that, that's still a very effective method of speaking about it too, because it's true. So I think there are some good messages in this, but most of it would fall on deaf ears, unfortunately. And it's important to understand who is the people that you're trying to talk to. So, yeah. With that, you guys, I'm going to go. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys again later. Have a good rest of your day, night, whatever. Peace.